Okay, good morning, everyone. We are up to Parak Mishna. Now, the halacha is that when it comes to reaping the fruits, the produce that grows during Shemitah, the halacha is that midaraisa, you're allowed to reap, but you cannot reap in the regular way, in the usual manner. It's got to be done in an unusual manner. And there's also a machlekes between the Rambam, Maimonides, and the Rash as to when this halacha applies. Does it apply anytime you want to gather Shemitah produce that's growing from the ground, which you're allowed to do? You have to do it only in an unusual manner, no matter what. That's the Rambam's opinion. Other opinions say that it only applies if you had a field and the Torah obligates us to allow anybody to come into our field during Shemitah, and you didn't do so. You stopped others from coming. So then even after you have allowed people in, if you want to reap, you got to do it in an unusual manner. But that's a machlokes rishonim as to when this idea of reaping in an unusual manner applies. But that's the point of the Mishnah. That's going to be a discussion of our Mishnah. And furthermore, the Rabbanan extended this to the processing of the grain, not only to the reaping itself, but to the processing, threshing, and stuff like that. There's also, it has to be in an unusual manner, and we'll see examples of that in our Mishnah. So the Mishnah reads, Te'enim shel Shavias, if you have figs of Shemitah, you cannot cut them with a muktzah, which here doesn't mean muktzah like on Shabbos, but it means muktzah here means a fig knife, a knife that was used for cutting down figs. That would be the regular manner of cutting them off from the trees. That you can't do. But you could cut them with a sword. That's not the usual way that you cut down figs, but that would be the manner how you would do it on Shemitah, because you have to do it in an unusual manner. Next example. So that's first example is an example in the reaping process, in the detaching from the ground itself. Here, that's an example that we have how when you actually reap, when you actually harvest and you detach it from the ground, you have to do it in an unusual manner. Then the next case is the following. Ein dorchin anavim begas. You may not press grapes in a wine press. Right now we're talking about processing. You've already gathered them. Now you want to process. So how do you process it? So when we're talking about processing the grapes into wine, which is what they are primarily for, the halacha is you cannot press them in a regular wine press. But you take a kneading trough, which is a large bowl, and you press the grapes in that. That is not, you usually do it in a whole official wine press. This is really a makeshift thing. You take a kneading trough, a kneading bowl, a large kneading bowl, you press the grapes in that. That's how you make your wine. Well, that's what you got to do during Shemitah. Now this means, we're talking about our olives. You want to press the olives. So you cannot press the olives in a bad, which means a olive press. Ubekoitev. A koitev is they translate that as a weighted beam. A large heavy beam weighed down with a large stone, which is placed over the olives to press them. That's how they were pressed. You had this large heavy beam weighed down with a large stone, and you press them in a olive press. So that's when the Mishnah says, Ein oisin zeisin bavad of a koitev. You cannot press the olives. You can't do it in a bad, which is an olive press, nor can you do it with that which you would do with a weighted beam. That's be the normal way you would do it. It would be in an olive press. You would take the weighted beam, put it down on the olives. That's how you would extract the olive oil from the olives. Although, but the Mishnah says, so what do you do? How do you process the olives during Shemitah? The olives from Shemitah. About kaitashu, but you could crush them. And then put them into a small press. A baidida is like the equivalent of the kneading trough by the grapes, but it seems to be some kind of a press. It's a small press. So by putting it into a small press, now that's your change. That's how you're doing it in a different manner than usual. But what you do is kaitish. There's a process. I can't tell you exactly all the steps of the process with the olives, but there is clearly I believe should say clearly, I believe, that in a regular case with the olive press, it sounds like you put the olives in the olive press, you weigh it down with this big heavy beam with the stone on it, and that basically, slowly crushes them and then crushes them more until you press out the oil. That's my understanding. But here in this case where you can't do that, you're going to crush it. You're going to start the process. You're going to crush those olives in the olive press, and perhaps using that big beam to get it crushed, or however you crush them. And you'll do that, and that part won't be necessarily different. The difference is when you actually get to the point of when you want to press the oil out, then you put it into this beidida, which is a small press, and that's in an unusual manner. Now, Reb Shimon Omer, the Mishnah concludes, Reb Shimon says, you can even grind them in the olive press and put them in a small press. According to Reb Shimon, you want to start the process of kind of breaking through the olives. You can even grind them in the olive press. At the end, when the actual pressing of the oil comes out, then it's in the bedida. That's when it's in the small press. But there seems to be, if I understand it correctly, the difference between the Tanakam and Reb Shimon is this earlier process, either crushing or doing more than crushing, grinding. Do you do that in the olive press or not? These were things that could be done in the olive press. According to the Tanakama, you can only crush. You can't go as far as grinding. Grinding already would be too much, getting into the regular getting too much into the process in the olive press, which that's the typical way it's done, and we don't want that. Reb Shimon says no. Reb Shimon says you can go as far as even to grind them in the olive press, as long as eventually you're going to put them into the small press, which is where the pressing out of the olive oil will take place. And the Bartanura speaks out the halachas like Reb Shimon that you can even grind it in the olive press and then you move it to the small press to press out the oil. Okay, now it's time for the Sefer HaMitzvot. Mitzvahs lois aseh shaloi lahalois alada sheyesh shum eloka acher zulas Hashem yisbarach. This is a prohibition against ever considering the possibility, shalas ladas, not to entertain the thought that there is some other God other than Hashem. Shneimar, as it says, v'yelochalim acherim al panai. You shall not have other gods in my presence. V'hamayla b'daitei chas v'shalom. Sheyesh shum eloka eloha acher zulasai. One entertains the thought that there is another God other than God. Or he's got some kind of a partner. Chas v'shalom, God forbid. Chas v'shalom, we should never say such a thing. Or he entertains the possibility that there's some kind of value, there's some kind of worth to idol worship. Chas v'shalom, that kind of a thought. Chas v'shalom. Harei zeh keifer v'ikar. By doing so, you now have denied the very fundamental principle when it comes to our belief in God. One should never say, one should never say anything that should have any kind of statement that would imply heresy, meaning the possibility of another God or a partnership. Or no one should ever say anything that would acknowledge any kind of form of idol worship. Because if you acknowledge idol worship, acknowledging some kind of value, some kind of worth to it, that is considered like denying the entire Torah, because by doing so, you are denying a fundamental principle in the belief of God. We even have to give up our lives or everything that we have for this. Meaning, if it's a question of giving up our life or actually declaring in some way that there's some other God, there's some kind of value to this form of idol worship, we have to ready to give up our lives not to do that. Because anything that touches on the fundamental principle of our belief in God, one is obligated to allow himself to be killed, not to transgress. So even if it means to make some kind of a statement that would imply heresy, you'd have to give up your life for that. This applies at all times. Rather, they translate as every occasion, every moment, both by men and by women. Have a great Shabbos. Take care.